How's it going, gobbies and grimmies? Welcome to West Fallon's workshop, and on the table today I've got a little Saurus warrior on his little riding mount. And I've taken the liberty of not gluing on his arm because it is an absolute bear to paint underneath that, so I'm just going to set that aside. And I've also taken the liberty of putting a magnet in his butt, so he can stick to his little dinosaur rider mount thing. And he doesn't come off even if you put him upside down with such a tiny little magnet. So I'm going to start with painting the dinosaur underneath, so I'm just going to set him aside. And we're going to put a light zenithal highlight on this. I make sure not to just go completely straight down on it so that my shadows aren't so stark. I'm making it soft. My intention is soft here. That's why I went with a gray base coat instead of just a black one. So now we have them all nice and pre-shaded and all that stuff. Probably a little bit darker than I would have liked, but yeah, hindsight is 20/20. I can always do better on the next one. So now I'm gonna go and pull down my quick and dirty homemade contrast paint. Now we're going to get into some detail work, so I'm going to clamp our guy down in my homemade painting vise because I'm a very DIY die type person and might have a problem with making everything myself. So, I'm going to grab a little bit of this paint, and I'm going to pick out all of the scales along the ridge of the back and a little bit down each leg and the arms to kind of give it a more striped appearance. Just a little bit of detail. Okay, so after that's dried a bit, I'm going to bring out the wet palette and some brushes and some other paints, and we're going to fill in some little details and other colors on them. You always got to make sure that you've shaken your paint up enough so that it doesn't squirt all that nasty medium and glazy things out of it, so you actually have a little bit of coverage. Now here's the part where we're going to abuse contrast a little bit. I'm going to use a light bluish base coat to tint the green contrast paint a little bit and give it more of a cooler edge to its more olive tinted main body. And while that's drying, I'm going to dip out a little bit of this pale light tan color with a toothpick because, you know, these pots suck. And I'm not going to let it dry out. Tasty. I'm just going to hit all of the horns and other bony areas. Now here's where I come in with a little bit of this Creed Camo contrast paint, and just smack it over the jade areas. And just kind of let it do its thing, be accurate, give it enough so that it actually colors, but not so much that it sits too hard on the surface. I want the blue to show through so that it's not quite so green, if that makes any sense at all. And then I'm just going to bring out my nice, nasty, floppy, rattly dry brush and gently hit the head a little bit because I went a little bit thick on the blue paint on him. So I'm just going to fix up those little details and it should be fine. Now I bring the palette back out. I'm going to grab a couple of washes, a fleshy wash and a more like kind of brownish sepia wash. And I'm going to hit all of the bony areas with the sepia wash, just to give them a little bit of a variation in color and, you know, a little bit of contrast. Now I'm going to use the flesh wash on the leather to keep this kind of reddish hue that I've got going on. It's just sort of a color I like for the leather. So I'm just going to apply that to all the straps in the saddle and all those kind of bits. And the tongue and teeth. Now while that's drying, I squirted out a little bit of my best yellow. And I'm going to grab the tiniest brush that I have and try my best not to completely ruin the eyes. I'm gonna get right in there, and just barely put some yellow in. Then I'm going to put a tiny bit of that flesh wash in the eyes once it's dried, so that I can give it just a little bit of contrast and knock down that yellow some. I'm going to come in with just a tiniest whiff of white and add a little specular highlight that nobody will ever see. Okay, let's change the camera angle a little bit to our little pink rider here. Got him all shaded up from the last step, and I'm probably going to destroy all of that with the airbrush. I'm using a Vallejo salmon color, and I'm just going to hit the all of him. Now I'm going to give him just a touch of a light highlight, but mostly just sort of a color modulation thing. Not even going to bother to clean the airbrush, I'm just going to toss in a little bit of light pink. Now I've got the wet palette back out in this kind of darker warlock pink color, sort of a magenta. And I'm just going to hit the scales on the ridge of his back and a little bit down the sides to give him sort of a more striped appearance similar to what I did on the blue mount. Now we're going to bring in my secret weapon for the pinkiness of this model. A little bit of this Vallejo Game Wash Red. And I'm just going to hit the pinky salmon just all over with it. Now I'm coming back with a little bit of that wraithbone color, and I'm going to hit all of his spiky and bony bits like his claws and teeth and all that kind of stuff. And I'm going to come in with the same reddish-brown color that I used for the leather, and I'm going to hit everything that I want to be leather, and everything that I want to be gold. Because I find that a brown base coat makes a really nice undercoat for gold paints. It kind of gives them a warmth to them. And for the steel-colored stuff, I'm coming in with this dark grayish-green color to kind of give it a more cool look to it. So a running theme with my Pink Lizardmen troops is that their Celestine weapons are made out of a special jade-like material. And considering that this guy has a pistola instead of a spear, I'm going to pick out some of the major parts of the weapon that are more weapon-like and give them a little bit of the jade treatment. It's pretty much the same shading as the other jade, except I've done some different highlighting on it. And I'm using a green and gold color shifting paint to kind of give it a little bit of a sparkle. So that's what I'm going to do here real quick. Now while that's drying, I'm going to go grab the soft tone again and hit all of the bony parts, just like I did on the other one. Now I'm going to grab that lighter mummy robes color and just dry brush all the edges of the bony bits and underneath the pre-metallic parts. I'm going to grab my medium silver color and give the pistol a little bit of a dry brush. I don't want to just straight up paint it silver. I want to dry brush it on there so that it appears to be more of a coated weapon that has been abraded. Then I'm just going to paint all of the metal armor pieces with the silver. And all the areas that I've slated for gold, I'm going to paint gold. Now I'm going to come in on the shield, which I've been giving the same treatment as everything else, and hit it with a little bit of this Screamer Pink, which, I don't know who is in the naming department, but this is most definitely a maroon and not really much of a pink, but I'll let it stand because I like the color. Then after that's dried up a bit, I'm going to come in with a very, very thin Warlock Purple and just sort of glaze it onto the upper edges of the larger stone scales, whatever this material is made out of. To be honest, I don't want to know what it's made out of. Is the shield made of lizard or the lizard made of shield? He screams, for he does not know. Now's the fun part where you get to glue his arm on after all this time. Just gonna grab a little hobby knife and scratch the paint off of the joints where his arms go together. Then hit it with a little bit of this Tamiya extra thin cement, making sure to smell as much of it as humanly possible. And boom, he is complete. Just gotta touch up that little arm joint once the glue's dry. But in the meantime, I can plop him down on his mount. And he can go and have a great time shooting other lizards with his cowboy pistol. And there we have it. Our little Saurus rider is complete.